entire screen. That worked last time.
Yep.
Okay. I can no longer see the Discord, but I hope you guys can see everything that I have here. The presentation. Good. All right. With that, thanks for the invitation and welcome everyone to my talk on the Bahariya Enigma, re-evaluating lost fossils and lasting mysteries. My name is Max. I'm a PhD student in Munich. So that's the city where this topic is closely related to. So this is very near and dear to me. All right. I want to start us off with some historical context. Today's topic is largely thanks to this guy with a very, very German name, Karl Heinrich Ernst Freiherr Stromer von Reichenbach, which we will be shortening to Stromer from now on. And he was a German paleontologist in the early 20th century, born in Nuremberg, Bavaria, as the son of nobility. You actually can see the family crest of the Stromers here on the left. And during his career, he led 3 expeditions to Egypt between 1901 and 1911. And initially, he was looking for mammals, but during his 3rd expedition, he would end up discovering something much, much larger, which is the first Egyptian dinosaur remains that you probably mostly know him for. A bit less well-known, but equally as important to the story, was Richard Markgraf, a man with a very different upbringing from Stromer. He was actually born into a musician's family in Presnitz, which is today in the Czech Republic, but back then was Austria-Hungary. And he joined a traveling band of musicians and actually got stuck in Cairo without money and in rather poor health. And he would earn his money playing the piano in the Shepherd's Hotel. And that's where he would eventually meet Ernst Stromer. And the two got along nicely. Richard Markgraf could speak Arab, which was a very good plus because Stromer didn't. And so eventually he agreed to help him on his expeditions, and he would be collecting the fossils for Stromer. So while Stromer would go back to Germany, Richard actually stayed in Egypt until his death in 1916, and he would continue to collect fossils for him. The goal of the 3rd expedition was the Bahariya Oasis. It is located some 400 kilometers southwest of Cairo. And the travel then would have taken about 3 weeks on camelback. So not very nice to go there back then. And then a Cenomanian, what is now in the middle of the desert, was actually very close to the coast of the Tethys Sea, because much of the continental shelf was then flooded. The sediments deposited there were mostly deltaic sand and mudstones, which are capped off by a limestone platform, which is the Cenomanian marine transgression. And in these sediments it would be the first dinosaurs from Egypt. And these fossils were shipped to Germany after they were dug up here, which was already where the trouble started for some of the fossils, because back then, it was during the time of World War I, when Egypt was under British colonial rule, and they would actually prohibit the export of the fossils to Germany. So some of the fossils there stayed for multiple years in a storage facility where they were improperly stored, and some of them got shuffled around, and some of them actually got destroyed then already. And it was only after World War I in 1936 when Stromer ended up finishing his descriptions of the Bahariya material. And he discovered that this was a very rich ecosystem filled with all sorts of really, really large fish. So you have the giant sawfish, Onchopristis, you have giant coelacanths and very big lungfish and tons of sharks. But you also have a lot of other animals. You have tons of reptiles. You have the top left here, you can see Libycosuchus, which is a terrestrial crocodile described by Stromer, or Stomatosuchus on the bottom right, also a very weird crocodile described by Stromer. And what he's most famous for, of course, the 4 dinosaurs he described, with Spinosaurus being everyone's favorite or least favorite dinosaur, depending on who you ask, of course. And then you also have Carcharodontosaurus, which you see on the right. And in the background, you have Egyptosaurus. There's a 4th dinosaur, which I assume is probably hiding somewhere in the trees here, which is Bahariyasaurus. And he's hiding because we have no idea what it actually is. So that's interesting as well. And yeah, with this work done and parts of the magnificent fauna of the Bahariya finally revealed, nothing bad would, of course, ever happen to this beautiful ecosystem anymore, as it was already extinct. But, well, something bad happened to the fossils. World War II was actually the second major conflict that would directly interfere in our story here. But this time it would not just be a simple delay of the shipping, because in April 1944, during World War II, the museum housing the specimen here in Munich was hit by a bomb, burned out completely, and all the fossils which were not brought to safety were lost. And along the fossils, actually, most of our archival material also got lost. So we don't even have a lot of the photographs of the fossil anymore, which back then must have existed. And after this destruction, it actually got rather quiet around the Egyptian dinosaurs for a while. This was until new discoveries, mainly from similar age the Kempkem group in Morocco, came to light in the 90s and early 2000s. Among the first of these was the description of a huge theropod skull in 1996. That skull actually greatly resembles Stroma's Carcharodontosaurus, so they concluded it must belong to the same genus. After that came a row of other, mostly isolated skeleton finds, among which most notably is here this giant Spinosaurid rostrum, also from the Kempkem, that was described in 2005. Then in 2014, we had the discovery of the neotype, I'm putting that in air quotes, but you can't see it, of Spinosaurus. And in 2020, this actually got an update with most of the caudal vertebral series being discovered. And of course, that solved everything, and there were no debates. And not controversial at all, which of course is not true, which is also why we're not going to start with Spinosaurus. We're going to instead start with the less controversial of the two, Carcharodontosaurus. Quick introduction. The Carcharodontosaurids are a group of allosauroid theropods that lived from the late Jurassic to the late Cretaceous, potentially all the way to the Campanian. They ranged in size from the 4-meter-long Lusovenator, which, to be fair, is probably a juvenile still, to the giant Giganotosaurus, which is among the contenders for the largest theropods ever. We actually right now have a somewhat decent fossil record of him. It's not perfect, but at least we have some specimens like Meraxis and Acrocanthosaurus, which are known for almost complete specimens. And then we have, of course, Concavenator, which is basically complete as well. So we now have a much, much better understanding of this group. They are characterized generally by their large skulls, and they have very flat and serrated teeth. And the first of these flat serrated teeth was actually described by Desperey and Savorgnan in 1925 as Megalosaurus saharicus. These were the first Carcharodontosaurus fossils that have gotten a name. Well, Megalosaurus is, of course, the wastebasket taxon that it was back then, where everyone just found the tooth and, theropod tooth must be Megalosaurus. The same authors actually changed the genus in 1927 to Dryptosaurus, which they did solely based on, it's Cretaceous, so mid-Cretaceous, so it can't be Megalosaurus, must be Dryptosaurus, even though the teeth look completely different. Then, in 1931, Stroma found the partial skeleton in Egypt that contained teeth that were very similar to these described by Desperey and Savorgnan as the Sim type. And he actually referred his specimen to these teeth, didn't make a neotype, just referred them, but changed the genus to Carcharodontosaurus. Well, not only is this specimen now lost, but also the original teeth are now lost. And thus, in 2007, Serino and Brusetti made the Moroccan skull the neotype of Carcharodontosaurus saharicus. And for the longest time after the destruction of the material, this is what we knew from the Egyptian specimen. It was that singular plate of depictions and the brain cast that is housed in Berlin, actually. So that is still around. That was until Oliver Rahud and I visited the Universitätsarchiv in Tübingen and discovered an additional photograph of the material as part of my master's thesis. On the right here, you can see this new photograph. You have the leg material, we have the skull, and this is really crucial because we can see elements in different views than we can see them on the drawings. And we can also cross-reference, and we can actually see the drawings are very accurate to what the fossil actually looked like. On the bottom here, you can also see another photograph of the specimen, which was actually known, but so far has not yet been described. So that is the maxilla in medial view. So that's what we did with this new material in hand. We did a complete updated redescription of the original material. And we have included a lot of detailed comparisons to other Carcharodontosaurid. We created an updated diagnosis for the taxon, and we even did a major revision of the phylogeny of the Carcharodontosauria as a whole. And there was one thing that became more and more clear the more we worked on that specimen, and that was that the Egyptian and the Moroccan specimen actually were not that close at all. So for starters, the Egyptian specimen is much smaller than the Moroccan one. And the shark-shaped teeth, which gave the genus its name, are actually only present in the Egyptian one, whereas the Moroccan specimen has kind of sort of regular Carcharodontosaur teeth. Furthermore, you have additional differences, such as the nasal bones, which in Tamaryraptor meet in an angle, and in Carcharodontosaurus meet in a flat line, as is typical for Carcharodontosaurids. But not only that, there's more differences. In the cerebrum, on the left here is the Egyptian specimen, on the right is Carcharodontosaurus. You can actually see that the smaller Egyptian specimen has a larger cerebral hemisphere width than the Moroccan one, which would be something that you would not expect. Additionally, we can see the anterorbital fossa on the nasal that does emarginate on the nasal in the Egyptian specimen, but not on the Moroccan one. And last but not least, you also have this little hornlet on the top that is not there in the Moroccan one. This really left us with one conclusion. They must be two distinct species. And since the name is now with the Moroccan skull, the Egyptian one didn't have a new name. And usually you should not name a specimen based on no longer remaining fossils under ICZN Declaration 37b. However, there are exceptions to that rule. And that is handled in ICZN Declaration 4537G to J. So this is going to sound a little bit like a law text. Some of our publication does read like a law text. So if you want to name a taxon based on no longer existing material, you got to have specific reasons for it, which we do. It is the only taxon known from East Africa that is a Carcharodontosaur. It is the only Carcharodontosaur from Africa that has postcranium associated with the cranium. And yeah, thus it is a crucial bridge between the East African and the West African fauna. You also must show that the specimen is actually lost and that you did everything in your power to restore the specimen, which, yeah, the building is bombed, so there's not that much we can do about it anymore. And we did actually find new material of the specimen. You also must meet the criterion of specialist consultation, which the people working on this paper were theropod specialists, so we also have a check on that one. And last but not least, very important, you need a comprehensive description of the animal, which we were able to do. We were actually able to extract 13 manuscript pages of description from this material. And we have multiple measurements of tables as well. So this is quite well described. And eventually, after some back and forth with the reviewers, we were able to argue that this specimen doesn't meet such an exceptional case. And we named Tamaryraptor margrafi in the honor of Richard Markgraf. Phylogenetically speaking, Tamaryraptor is a non-Carcharodontosaurine Carcharodontosaurid. That is a mouthful. What that means is that the specimen is actually not as closely related to Carcharodontosaurus, the Moroccan one, which the Moroccan specimen is actually more closely related to the South American taxa like Giganotosaurus, Mapusaurus, or Tyrannotitan than it is to the Egyptian one. Also, in our phylogenetic revision, we found a new relationship within the outside of the Carcharodontosauria, I should say, the Carcharodontosauriformis. We actually found that the Matriacanthosaurs are the closest relatives to the Carcharodontosaurs and not the Allosaurids. All right, and after this, I think we should talk about the sailback elephant in the room. And yeah, needless to say, there's been a lot of work done about Spinosaurus. And
don't you mean Spinosaurus, so because you said cell-backed elephant? Sorry, go on.
That was actually not intentional. But yeah, there has been a lot of work done about that animal. And most of that is actually, or a lot I should say, is actually about the potential lifestyle of this animal. There's not that much that talks about the phylogeny or anatomy of this animal. And if that is done, that is usually done rather superficially, which is actually kind of close to what we saw with Temeraraptor. It's like people talk about it, but they don't really look at it. So that's what we did. And that is work in progress. But we're writing a new paper, A Prehistoric Identity Crisis. What even is a Spinosaurus? And we basically did the same for Spinosaurus as we did for Temeraraptor. First of all, as with the Carcharodontosaurus, a little introduction to the Spinosaurids. The Spinosaurids are a family of Cretaceous theropods. They have long snouts and conical teeth. They're known from Africa, Europe, South America, and Southeast Asia. And don't let all these colorful silhouettes fool you. We have no idea what most of these animals look like. The fossil record of this group is extremely poor. So not much is known actually about these things. Spinosaurus itself doesn't really need an introduction. It's the giant sail-backed crocodile heron, which we know surprisingly little about, despite every 6-year-old kid, including me back then, being an expert in the animal. It was actually the first Spinosaur named. And as with Temeraraptor, its fossils were the victims of World War II, so they are no longer around. If they would still be around, this specimen right here would be one of the most complete Spinosaurines that we know of, which is a true shame that this specimen is no longer around. Other than Spinosaurus, there were originally other Spinosaurid material from the Bahariya. There is actually, if I have to remember correctly, like 6 specimens there, more or less complete. The most complete one is Spinosaurus B, which had some axial material, some vertebrae and some ribs, and some of the leg material, which is surprisingly small for the vertebrae associated. So even back then, Stroma did question the association of the leg material, which you see on the bottom, to the rest of the specimen. So in our paper, as I already said, we did the same as we did for Temeraraptor. We reviewed everything that there is to review on these things. We did an updated description and diagnosis of the taxon. So we have now an updated diagnosis on the right here, which I'm not going to spoil everything, but you can see it's quite large. It's actually much longer than the one for Temeraraptor because Spinosaurus is so weird. Even the spine, so that is taking aside the huge neural spine, there is a lot of things that are very weird with this animal. We also tried answering the question, and I think we have a very good point of how many specimens are there in the Spinosaurus B. So are the legs actually part of the exoskeleton or not? We did have a look at if Spinosaurus B is Spinosaurus aegyptiacus or not. And we also compared all the Egyptian material with the Chem Spinosaurids. And last but not least, we did a little Spinosaurid phylogeny update, but that is actually not the focus on in this paper this time. So what else is next? After that paper is done, I want to take a little bit of a break from the Bahariya. I need to recover from this and actually focus on my PhD for a while. And there is still more to do. And at one point, I kind of want to get around to doing that. There is still Bahariyasaurus after all. And then there's also the sauropods from the Bahariya and a lot of other material. And that does deserve another look. Until we have new fossils from the Bahariya, this is the best we can do. And with that, I would like to thank you all for listening. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask.